Rise of the European Emperor by Taishan Laonyo.
Chapter 111 Buying Horses. As a traverser, if Marin does not fight for hegemony, it would be a shame for the traverser. And to fight for hegemony, a large cavalry team is indispensable. However, although European horses are good, they are too delicate. They need to be fed with concentrated feed at any time, and the feeding cost is very high. For example, Marin's warhorse Karl eats feed worth 10 pfennigs a day, which is equivalent to 5 days' salary for ordinary people. And some poor families spend no more than 2 pfennigs a day. So, this is equivalent to eating the expenses of an ordinary family for 5 days every day. If you want to feed 10,000 heavy cavalry, the money spent on feed every day is as high as 100,000 pfennigs, worth 1,667 gold coins. Of course, 10 pfennigs a day is Marin's standard. After all, Marin is a local tyrant. But no matter how to save, the average knight's daily expenditure on war horses can reach 5 pfennigs a day. After all, European oats are very expensive, and European horses are tall and have a large appetite. Therefore, in Europe, there are very few countries with tens of thousands of heavy cavalry. As far as Marin knows, there is only one in France. But the French knight army is not supported by the salary provided by the court, but by the fiefdom. There are about 10,000 knights in France, and about 10,000 of them have fiefdoms. On average, each knight with a fiefdom has a fiefdom area of 1,500 acres. Those French knights who followed the king to fight actually paid for themselves. However, the 1,500-acre fiefdom is enough for them to support themselves and their horses. The other thousands of plate knights rely on the French central finance for support. They are mercenaries and have high expenses. That is to say, a powerful country like France may not be able to afford it in other countries. It is basically difficult for other European countries to support such a large number of heavily armored knights. Venice can afford it, but it is a maritime country, and knights are of no use at all, and there is a lack of knights with high martial arts skills. And Marin's boss, Maximilian I, had a standing army, most of which were infantry, heavy armored knights, only 1,500 people. Even if the whole country was mobilized and all the knights in the Austrian and Burgundy manors were recruited, the total number would not exceed 5,000. Unless all the knights of the German countries were summoned, the total number could be higher than that of France. So, although he had always wanted to build a large cavalry team, Marin was always worried that he could not afford to raise so many war horses. After all, if 10,000 heavy cavalry were equipped, the feed consumption of war horses alone would be 500,000 to 600,000 gold coins per year, which was very terrifying. Therefore, Marin currently only had 1,000 war horses of 1,000 wandering knights recruited from the Teutonic Kingdom, and 800 war horses of 800 black shirt knights. The other horses were draft horses that ate more grass than feed. Moreover, because Marin himself opened up 5,000 ograms of oat fields in East Frisia and planted oats himself, the cost of raising horses was reduced by more than half. Otherwise, the annual expenditure for the 1,800 war horses alone would be hundreds of thousands of gold coins. Fortunately, Marin planted oats himself, and the yield was high, so he could save most of the cost. But even so, it cost Marin a lot to feed the 1,800 war horses and thousands of draft horses. Therefore, when he remembered that the Eastern European Mongolian horses were the Don horses of later generations, he was pleasantly surprised. Because these Don horses are similar to Mongolian horses, they only need to eat grass at ordinary times. Only when they go out to fight, because the physical energy consumption of running with people is too large, they need to add some feed. Moreover, these Eastern European Mongolian horses are much taller than Mongolian horses, and their shoulder height can reach more than 1.5 meters. The Mongolian horse, with a shoulder height of only 120 to 135 centimeters, seems too short. If you are short, you have short legs. Even if you have the advantage of good endurance, when charging, because of your short legs, you can't catch up with other horses in the charging speed. Therefore, in later generations, in horse racing, Mongolian horses can only participate in endurance races. No one chooses Mongolian horses for sprinting. However, on the battlefield, sprint speed is very important. Therefore, the Mongolian horse with short legs is not as good as the long-distance raid when charging. Although the Eastern European Mongolian horse, Don horse, is also a descendant of the Mongolian horse, it retains many advantages of the Mongolian horse. But because the average shoulder height can reach 1.5 meters, compared with the Mongolian horse, each one is a long-legged appa, and the speed of running and sprinting is naturally faster. Although the endurance is not as good as the Mongolian horse, the advantage in sprinting speed is enough to offset the disadvantage in endurance. It just so happens that Marin knows that in the future, plate knights will be eliminated by muskets, and light cavalry will be the main force of future cavalry. Later light cavalry prefers to use medium-sized horses like Arabian horses that are about the same height as the Don horse, rather than the tall and big horses currently popular in Europe. Because the heavy horses in Europe have the disadvantage of poor endurance. These heavy horses may be strong and have a fast sprint speed. But after rushing for a period of time, they will wither and need to rest for a long time. Moreover, they eat a lot and the cost of raising them is higher. Therefore, the modern European cavalry basically crossbred local horse breeds with medium-sized Arabian horses to cultivate medium-sized horses with shorter stature but excellent endurance and speed for use as military horses. In fact, the Eastern European Mongolian horse itself is mixed with the excellent bloodline of Arabian horses and even Fergana horses. Therefore, it is very suitable to be a mount for light cavalry. Later, the Cossacks rode Eastern European Mongolian horses, Don horses, to help the Tsar to conquer the world's largest land area. Standing in the main hall of the Crimean Khanate, after quick thinking, Marin decided to buy Eastern European Mongolian horses from the Crimean Khanate for a long time as military horses for light cavalry. Even heavy cavalry can be equipped with 2 Eastern European Mongolian horses for exchange. As for those local draft horses that also need to eat feed, Marin decided to eliminate them and deal with them to neighboring countries. In this way, most of the horses in Marin's army will save a lot of feeding costs after switching to Eastern European Mongolian horses, which can also be regarded as saving a lot of expenses. So, Marin bowed again and asked Munkagayar Khan, "Khan, I heard that your country has a lot of war horses. I wonder if the Khan has any idea of selling them. You want to buy our horses?" Munkagayar Khan was surprised. However, he was also a little happy. In fact, the Crimeans have also sold war horses to Europeans. Unfortunately, plate armor knights are popular in Europe, and what is needed is a strong and tall horse, not a medium-sized horse like the Eastern European Mongolian horse. Therefore, the Crimeans failed to sell, so they had to be human traffickers. And if someone is willing to buy the Crimean war horses, then the Crimean Khanate will have another way to make money. You know, the Crimean Khanate is basically a nomadic country, and there are large groups of horses on the grassland. Choose the horses that are suitable for war horses, not too many. Marin wants to buy, and Munkagayar Khan can find tens of thousands of horses to sell in minutes. Yes, Khan, I envy your invincible archers and cavalry, and I plan to form a similar unit. Don't you Europeans prefer heavily armored knights riding tall horses? Why, do you also like our Mongolian tactics? Genghis Khan's army defeated the European knights back then, so I think the Mongolian cavalry's tactics are more advanced. Marin flattered calmly. What about the price? Munkagayar Khan looked at Marin expectantly. How about 10 gold coins per horse? Marin bargained hard. You know, in Western Europe, the price of a warhorse is as high as about 100 gold coins. Marin offered 10 gold coins for the Eastern European Mongolian horse, which was indeed very low. However, no one is buying Crimean warhorses at the moment, and Marin saw this and bargained hard. No, it's too low. As far as I know, those big and tall horses in Europe are worth dozens of gold coins. Munkagayar Khan also knew about several neighboring countries such as Lithuania. Lithuania has a developed animal husbandry industry, and the price of horses here is cheaper than that in Western Europe, only dozens of gold coins. But Khan, European horses are all big and tall, can they carry knights wearing heavy plate armor? In order to lower the price, Marin naturally found faults. If it is an ordinary pack horse, 10 gold coins are enough, but for a war horse, it should be at least 20 gold coins. Munkagayar Khan was obviously dissatisfied with the price offered by Marin, thinking it was too low. Khan, your horses are all raised on the grasslands, growing up eating wild grass, and there is no cost at all. Selling one is a free profit, so why use high prices to scare off buyers? Munkagayar Khan thought about it, and it was true. Eastern European Mongolian horses were all raised by herders on the Eastern European grasslands, growing up eating wild grass, and there was really no cost. Well, labor costs, in this era, it's better not to mention. However, Munkagayar Khan was not happy to be pushed down so low. So he said, but the price offered by the envoy is too low. Malin wanted to continue to lower the price, but he considered that the biggest purpose of this mission to the Crimean Khanate was to exchange for the Crimean Khanate to send troops, not to buy horses. Therefore, Marin made concessions to avoid upsetting Munkagayar Khan. Let's put it this way. If the Khan is willing, I am willing to represent our North Sea Chamber of Commerce and purchase 1,000 war horses from the Khan at the price of 15 gold coins per war horse and 8 gold coins per pack horse. If your war horses can adapt to the local climate in our country, we will purchase a large number of war horses from your country every year at the same price. Mungjire Khan calculated in his mind and found that selling horses was more profitable than selling slaves. Moreover, Marin was the first wealthy customer willing to buy a large number of horses from the Crimean Khanate. So, he did not raise the price again to avoid scaring away Marin, the wealthy customer. Therefore, he waved his hand, okay, it's settled. Chapter 112 Great Khan, the Russians need to be punished. After agreeing with Mungjire Khan on the price of buying the Eastern European Mongolian horse, Don horse, the atmosphere between the two sides became more harmonious. Next, Malin was invited to take a seat by Mungjire Khan and received courtesy and hospitality. At this time, not only Mungjire Khan, but other Crimean nobles looked at Malin with fiery eyes. You know, although the Crimean Khanate has only 250,000 people, including the newly conquered Golden Horde, it has only about 400,000 people. However, its land area, including the newly conquered Golden Horde, has reached more than 200,000 square kilometers. Moreover, most of them are the warmest grasslands in Eastern Europe on the Black Sea. Therefore, the Crimean Khanate has countless horses, cattle and sheep. Each of the great nobles of the Crimean Khanate present has at least a total of more than 100,000 horses, cattle and sheep. However, in the past, because the allies of the Crimean Khanate were not short of horses, cattle and sheep, and other countries had no dealings with the Crimean Khanate and were even hostile to each other. Therefore, so many cattle and sheep can only be eaten by themselves. Even if they can be sold, they are all at very low prices. Therefore, if someone can really buy the Crimean Khanate's horses, cattle and sheep on a large scale, it will definitely be a great thing for the Crimean nobles who own countless livestock. Marin did not reveal his true identity, but only said that he was a representative of a large chamber of commerce called the North Sea Chamber of Commerce under the Hanseatic League, but he had the right to decide whether to import livestock from the Crimean Khanate. Therefore, at this moment, the nobles of the Crimean Khanate, including Mungjire Khan, regarded Marin as a little god of wealth, and their attitude was much more polite than before. The two deputy envoys from the Hanseatic League and the deputy envoy sent by Lithuania had no idea what they said to Marin and Mungjire Khan. Because they did not understand Tatar. When Marin said he wanted to buy 1,000 war horses from the Crimean Khanate, the Hanseatic League didn't care, but the Lithuanian deputy envoy expressed his opposition. Lord Marin, why do you want to import livestock from the Crimean Khanate? We have a lot of horses, cattle and sheep to sell in Lithuania. In fact, more than half of the 50,000 cattle that are driven from Poland to Germany every year come from the Ukrainian steppes under Lithuanian control. However, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and the Kingdom of Poland are a personal union, and it is very convenient for these livestock to pass through Poland. Even in 1569, after Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania were united again to form a federation, the federation is one, the confederation is not one, the Ukrainian region was ceded to the Kingdom of Poland. Therefore, the history books say that Poland exports 50,000 cattle to the German region every year. And that Poland is actually the later Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, not the current long and narrow Kingdom of Poland. Therefore, the Lithuanian deputy envoy expressed dissatisfaction with Marin's desire to import war horses on a large scale from the Crimean Khanate, and wanted to win the order. Because Lithuania also has a lot of horses. After all, the Ukrainian steppes now belong to the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Deputy Envoy Victor, I know that the Grand Duchy of Lithuania has sufficient livestock, but you know, my choice to import livestock from the Crimean Khanate has very important political significance. If we don't import livestock from the Crimean Khanate and let them taste the sweetness, how can they be willing to help us fight the Grand Duchy of Moscow? Are those orders important, or is the national security of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania important? Marin explained the reason for doing so to the Lithuanian Deputy Envoy Victor. Of course, this is only one aspect. The Eastern European Mongolian horses of the Crimean Khanate are resistant to rough feeding and are very suitable as military horses, which is also an important reason. However, this reason alone is enough to shut up Deputy Envoy Victor. Victor has not forgotten the desperate situation in which the Grand Duchy of Lithuania was jointly oppressed by the Crimean Khanate and the Grand Duchy of Moscow in the past 2 years and was forced to cede several cities and large tracts of grassland. Then, Marin mentioned the cattle trade. Before, Marin asked Polish merchants to buy more than 20,000 cattle. Among them, the price of each cattle was only about 10 gold coins. However, because Marin intercepted them, the price of beef in southern Germany and Italy, which traditionally imported Polish-Lithuanian cattle in southern Germany, rose due to shortages. Now, the price of Polish cattle has reached 13 gold coins per head. To be honest, this price is still cheap. In Germany, the price of a strong cattle is as high as more than 20 gold coins. But Marin is not satisfied. Everyone wants to spend less money and buy the goods they want. So, Marin took the initiative to propose to import cattle from Crimea. This time, Marin was promoted from the little god of wealth in the eyes of many Tatar nobles in Crimea to the big god of wealth. Cows are basically grass eaters at ordinary times. Only when they are plowing the land and pulling the plow, because it is too hard, will they have the opportunity to eat extra meals and feed. Therefore, raising cattle at ordinary times has no cost at all. It is enough for herders to drive the cattle to the prairie to graze. The Crimean Khanate has no agriculture, and horse plowing is also popular in Eastern Europe, not cattle plowing. Therefore, the sales of the Crimean Khanate's cattle are also a problem. They are generally digested within the country for meat and milk. When Marin asked about the price of cattle, not only the Tatar nobles, but also Munkyr Khan were excited. You know, as the Khan of the Crimean Khanate, Munkyr Khan has the most cattle and sheep. The number of cattle alone is as high as more than 90,000. If these cattle were marketable, Munkyr Khan would also make a lot of money. Then, the two sides had a friendly and sharp bargaining. Marin was sure that the Crimean Khanate had no market for livestock, so he tried his best to lower the price and lowered the price of each cow to 7.5 gold coins. In fact, at this time, Munkyr Khan had already laughed in his heart. Marin thought he had made a big profit, but he didn't know that when the Crimean Khanate exported cattle to Turkey at a low price, the Turks only gave 5 gold coins per head, which was a completely cheap price. Marin bargained so hard according to the price of Polish cattle, but it was still half higher than the price of cattle exported by the Crimean Khanate to Turkey. Marin, who thought he had taken advantage, told Munkyr Khan very proudly that after he returned, he would urge his troops to make up their minds to import a large number of live cattle from the Crimean Khanate. If everything goes well, the annual import volume may reach 10,000 heads. Upon hearing this number, Munkyr Khan was no longer calm, and almost came down to hug Marin. You know, at 7.5 gold coins per cow, 10,000 cows, that's 75,000 gold coins. Sigmund, I was able to bribe Munkyr Khan with 15,000 gold coins. This super large order of 75,000 gold coins per year almost made Munkyr Khan dizzy. In fact, because the annual volume of 10,000 heads was too amazing, a group of Tatar nobles in the hall came to Munkyr Khan and asked for a certain export share to avoid being taken alone by the greedy Munkyr Khan. In fact, Munkyr Khan really planned to take this big order alone. However, the other nobles in the hall were easy to deal with. The 4 Wanhu were all-powerful nobles with heavy troops, and Munkyr Khan could not ignore their requests. Therefore, for this matter, Munkyr Khan decided to hold a court meeting to decide on the distribution. Seeing that the Crimean Khanate attached so much importance to the large order of releasing 10,000 cattle, Marin felt confident and finally revealed his true purpose. Khan, you have become the common leader of the Kipchak steppe. I wonder if the Grand Duchy of Moscow, the Principality of Ryazan and other Russian countries have paid you the tithe? Marin looked like, I'm just asking casually, but in fact, his spirit was tense at this time. Because the time for the decisive battle has come. Ah. Tithe? Munkyr Khan was stunned for a moment, then shook his head. No, they no longer paid tithes during the era of Ahmad Khan. At the beginning, the reason why the Grand Duchy of Moscow colluded with the Crimean Khanate to engage in the Golden Horde was to refuse to pay the tithe that should be paid to the Golden Horde. Moreover, Ahmad Khan did not ask the Grand Duchy of Moscow to pay all the tithes, as long as half of it was enough, but the Grand Duchy of Moscow was still very unhappy. Because even half of it was too much. The Crimean Khanate and the Grand Duchy of Moscow formed an alliance, so naturally it was embarrassed to ask for the tithe from it. Moreover, the Grand Duchy of Moscow was not a good person, but a powerful faction. Khan, I heard that the Grand Duchy of Moscow has a population of several million. If everyone pays you a tithe, the annual tax amount is at least millions of gold coins. Marin said in a bewitching tone. But in the ears of Munkyr Khan and the Tatar nobles, it was like thunder. Millions of gold coins. Tens of thousands of gold coins, gold coins. At this moment, Munkyr Khan and many Tatar nobles breathed quickly and fell into deep thought. Yes, the population of the Grand Duchy of Moscow is the largest in Eastern Europe. If the tithe is restored in the Grand Duchy of Moscow, will the Crimeans still need to rob people and sell them as slaves? Moreover, in a year, they dispatched so many large-scale cavalry, and the slaves they robbed were only sold for about 100,000 gold coins, and often even less than this number. However, if the collection of tithe in the Russian states is restored, millions of gold coins can be obtained every year, which is much better than robbery. Seeing that Munkagir Khan and the Tatar nobles fell into deep thought, Marin naturally wanted to make persistent efforts. Khan, collecting tithe from the Russian states is the power given by God to the Golden Horde Khan. The Grand Duchy of Moscow actually refused to pay, which really deserves to be punished. After saying this, Marin looked indignant, as if he was insulted by the Russians in the Grand Duchy of Moscow. Chapter 113 Provocation. Munkagir Khan was still thinking, but the Tatar nobles on the side were indignant by Marin's words. Yes, the Muscovites deserve to be punished. They dare not pay the tithe. Yes, it's too abominable. They should be taught a lesson. Yes, teach them a lesson. Munkagir Khan looked at the generals below. How could he not know what they were thinking? Before, the average annual slave trade was 70,000 to 80,000 gold coins. Munkagir Khan usually took out half of it and distributed it to his subordinates, the Wanhu and Qianhu, and only took half himself. Now, seeing the huge profits of more than 1 million gold coins every year, these subordinates are jealous again. You know, according to the rules on the grassland, 1 million gold coins every year, half for himself and half for his subordinates. In the end, the profits obtained by the subordinates every year will be more than 10 times that of the slave trade, and these bastards can't help but be excited. Of course, not only the subordinates were excited, but Munkagir Khan himself was also very excited. Even though he could earn 30,000 to 40,000 gold coins from the slave trade every year, these 30,000 to 40,000 gold coins were used to cover the expenses of the palace and the expenses of the Khan's direct subordinates. The Crimean Khanate originally had a population of 250,000, of which about 40,000 were direct subordinates of the royal Gurai family Khan court. These 40,000 people were also an independent military and civil organization. It also costs a lot of money to manage and operate these 40,000 Khan court direct subordinates every year. For example, those 1,000 households and 100 households belonging to the Gurai family, as well as various civil servants, and the 2,000 elite soldiers directly under the Khan court, all have to pay for themselves. Therefore, even if 30,000 to 40,000 gold coins can be distributed every year, it is still a bit insufficient to make ends meet. Sometimes, the salaries of the subordinates are not paid in cash, and can only be compensated with cattle and sheep. However, in a grassland country, who is short of cattle and sheep? Therefore, gold and silver are what the Crimean Khanate needs most. Because livestock may not be universal and inconvenient to carry, while gold and silver are universal throughout Europe and even the entire grassland. To be honest, Munkagir Khan also wanted to force the Grand Duchy of Moscow to pay a tithe to him, but when he thought of the Grand Duchy of Moscow fighting against the 200,000 troops gathered by Ahmad Khan, Munkagir Khan's scalp was tingling. After all, although the Crimean Khanate could gather 70,000 to 80,000 cavalry, only 40,000 strong cavalry were truly combat capable. Although the newly conquered Golden Horde headquarters contributed 150,000 people and could recruit more than 20,000 cavalry, Munkagir Khan did not trust them very much. Munkagir Khan himself was not sure about using 40,000 cavalry to fight against 200,000 troops. Thinking of the 200,000 troops, Munkagir Khan sobered up and said to Marin calmly, "I think this is the real purpose of the envoy, right?" Seeing Munkagir Khan with a calm face, Marin was also a little surprised. However, he did not panic, but said calmly, "Yes, this is indeed one of my goals, but Khan, am I wrong?" Munkagir Khan was also stunned after hearing this. Yes, he knew that the other party was instigating him to confront the Muscovites, but what the other party said was indeed correct. He claimed to have inherited the position of the Khan of the Golden Horde, but as the Khan of the Golden Horde, he did have the right to collect tithes from the Russian countries. Therefore, what Marin said was completely fine. However, Munkagir Khan continued, "But Moscow can dispatch 200,000 troops." Marin understood in his heart. It turned out that he was afraid of the 200,000 troops of the Muscovites. I said it earlier, I have plenty of reasons. Marin has read the relevant history and knows that Ivan III and Ahmad Khan won the decisive battle by luck. Strictly speaking, the Muscovites did not win, but forced themselves to scare Ahmad Khan away. Moreover, Ahmad Khan did not die at the hands of the Muscovites, but died at the hands of the Siberian Khanate's army that attacked halfway. So, Marin replied, "Khan, although the Grand Duchy of Moscow can gather an army of 200,000, only 20,000 of them are combat ready. The remaining 180,000 people are actually mostly temporarily recruited from farmers. Excuse me, can those farmers compare with the 40,000 elite cavalry soldiers under the Khan's command?" Munkagir Khan shook his head, and the Tatar nobles beside him were also full of disdain, with arrogant and confident expressions. Let's talk about the war between the 200,000 troops mobilized by the Muscovites and Ahama Khan. Think about it, did the two armies fight in the end? Munkajee Khan and the Tatar nobles all shook their heads. That's it. In fact, Ahama Khan was also frightened by the number of the 200,000 troops of the Muscovites. After all, there are more than 10,000 soldiers and horses, which are boundless. But in fact, the Grand Duke of Moscow Ivan III was even more afraid than Ahama Khan at that time. He fled back to Moscow halfway, and was later forced to return to the front line in fear. Ah! There is such a thing. The Crimeans present were full of interest. They only knew about the difficulties of the battle, but they didn't know the details. And those details were recorded by the Muscovites at that time and passed down to later generations. In this era, it is impossible to leak them out casually. After all, the process was too embarrassing. Then, relying on his memory, Marin told all the Crimean nobles present in Tatar about Ivan III's embarrassing performance in the battle. Munkajee Khan and the Tatar nobles laughed happily after hearing the plot that Ivan III was scared to become a deserter. At the same time, they finally understood that most of the 200,000 troops of the Muscovites were used to support the facade. At this time, Munkajee Khan and the Tatar nobles were not afraid of the 200,000 troops of the Moscow Principality. Seeing that the Tatar nobles were relieved, Marin took out the sheepskin drawings that had been prepared long ago and invited the Tatar nobles to watch. Munkajee Khan also followed curiously to watch. Pointing to the territorial map on the drawing, Marin said to Munkajee Khan, "Khan, please look, this is the Crimean Khanate and this is the Grand Duchy of Moscow. The Grand Duchy of Moscow is more than 10 times larger than the area controlled by the Khan, and the population is more than 10 times that of the Khan." The faces of Munkajee Khan and the Tatar nobles who were watching changed. They didn't pay much attention to it, but until someone put the map in front of them, they realized that the little brother, Grand Duchy of Moscow, which they didn't think much of, was actually better than the Crimean Khanate in terms of territory and population. "Khan, my teacher once said that there can't be two tigers in one mountain. On the Kipchak steppe, a country that far exceeds the Khan's Khanate in terms of territory and population has appeared. It is definitely not a blessing for the Khan." Munkajee Khan didn't speak, but stared at the map specially marked in Tatar by Marin, and pondered for a long time. Obviously, he was greatly touched. Chapter 114, Goal Achieved. In fact, at this time, Munkajee Khan was greatly shocked. He thought of the former Golden Horde and Crimean Khanate. Originally, the Crimean Khanate was just a small Khanate separated from the Golden Horde. However, the Crimean Khanate has grown stronger and swallowed up the main branch of the Golden Horde. Similarly, looking at the map, Munkajee Khan was thinking one day, when the Grand Duchy of Moscow becomes extremely powerful, will it swallow up the Crimean Khanate? Thinking about it, Munkajee Khan was lost in thought. "Do you want me to send troops to attack the Grand Duchy of Moscow?" After waking up after a while, Munkajee Khan looked at Marin thoughtfully. "Khan, you are not fighting alone. Who else?" "Lithuania." We are still in a hostile relationship now." Munkajee Khan was a little stunned. "As long as the Khan is willing, Lithuania can become the Khan's friend at any time," Marin said firmly. This is also the task entrusted to Marin by Lithuania. "This is too much of a joke," Munkajee Khan murmured. "Great Khan, I wonder if you have ever heard this saying, there are no eternal allies between countries, only eternal interests. Didn't the Kipchak Khans of the past support you today and him tomorrow in order to balance the Russian countries and prevent one from dominating? There are no eternal allies between countries, only eternal interests." Munkajee Khan murmured and repeated this classic saying, as if he had realized something. "Yes. But Moscow has become the only one," Munkajee Khan said depressedly. "It's too late for him to balance now. In addition to the four Khanates, the powerful countries in the Russian countries, such as the Novgorod Republic, the Grand Duchy of Tver, and the Principality of Yaroslav, have been annexed by the Grand Duchy of Moscow. The Principality of Ryazan has actually become a vassal of the Grand Duchy of Moscow. Only the weak Pskov Republic was left, barely holding on with the support of the Livonian Order. Khan, Moscow is indeed the only dominant power among the Russian states. However, you can still find a balance between Moscow and Lithuania. Find a balance between Moscow and Lithuania." Munkajee Khan thought for a long time, and suddenly his eyes lit up. But after a while, Munkajee Khan said dejectedly, "But Lithuania is too weak. It has no way to be bullied by the Moscow people. It has even come to the point of asking Hungary for help in seeking peace. Can such a weak country be used to balance with Moscow?" Hearing this, Marin laughed. Khan, didn't you realize? It's not that Lithuania is too weak, but because you, Khan, helped the Grand Duchy of Moscow bully Lithuania. If it weren't for the help of the powerful Crimean cavalry, Lithuania would not have been beaten so badly by Moscow. Hearing this, Munkajee Khan and the Tatar nobles next to him suddenly realized, and then they were very complacent. Indeed, our cavalry is powerful. Your Excellency, if we go to attack Moscow, we can dispatch 40,000 cavalry. However, we are all cavalry and are not good at attacking cities. The walls of Moscow are so strong. Khan, why do you want to attack Moscow? How else can you weaken the Muscovites? What you want to do is to weaken Moscow, not destroy it. You just need to take the cavalry and sweep the countryside of the Muscovites, rob them of their money, food, and population, then you can weaken the Grand Duchy of Moscow. This is good. Munkajee Khan suddenly remembered, isn't this what the Crimeans are best at? What if the Muscovites send a large army to chase us, asked 1,000 households of the Crimean Khanate. On the steppe, your cavalry will be afraid of the Muscovite infantry? You mean we retreat and put the battlefield on the steppe? Yes. Moreover, if the Muscovites dare to go all out, I think, as allies, the Lithuanians will definitely not sit idly by. They can easily break into Moscow from the western border. It sounds good, but, envoy, under what pretext should we send troops to attack the Grand Duchy of Moscow? We were allies before, and it's hard to find an excuse to send troops now. Munkajee Khan was tempted, but he hadn't thought of a good excuse yet. Khan, I have an idea. You might as well use the excuse that the other party has not paid you the tithe after inheriting the throne of the Golden Horde Khan as an excuse to send troops to the Principality of Ryazan. Ryazan? Why? Aren't you going to attack Moscow? Ryazan is southeast of Moscow. As long as your army reaches Ryazan, the Muscovites will be terrified. Before, the troops sent to invade Finland will also be transferred back. After all this fuss, you want us to help Sweden out. Munkajee Khan suddenly realized. There is such a reason. Marin did not deny it. What's the benefit for this Khan? Marin clapped his hands, and Khan brought up the gift he brought, a golden knife and 10,000 gold coins. Sure enough, Munkajee Khan was not interested in the golden knife, but the 10,000 gold coins made Munkajee Khan unable to move his eyes away. Khan, please accept it. Well, is there anything else? Munkajee Khan asked greedily. Khan, Ryazan city is not as strong as Moscow city. As long as you capture Ryazan, what property will you not have? You know, Ryazan is a famous agricultural area, relatively rich, and it is also the granary of Moscow. As long as you lead your troops to capture Ryazan, you can not only seize a large amount of property, but also capture a lot of slaves. Munkajee Khan thought about it, it was true. Ryazan was already rich. If you captured Ryazan city, not to mention the wealth, the more than 10,000 people in the city and the large population in the surrounding countryside alone would allow the Crimean Khanate to capture a lot of slaves. It is indeed a wonderful idea to lead the army to conquer Ryazan, which can not only gain huge benefits, but also deter the Grand Duchy of Moscow, but not directly turn against Moscow. What else? Munkajee Khan's greed seems endless. Marin wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, but he had an idea in his mind. I can make the decision now and buy 1,000 Mongolian war horses and 10,000 cattle from the Khan. This is just this year's order, and there will be every year in the future. Really? Munkajee Khan's eyes lit up. If what Marin said is true, then he will receive a super large order worth 90,000 gold coins every year in the future. No joke. Khan, I brought a deposit of 40,000 gold coins, and the remaining 50,000 will be sent immediately as long as you send troops to Ryazan. At the same time, please prepare cattle and horses. This is certain, this Khan has nothing else in his hand, but a lot of livestock. If Marin only buys this time, Munkajee Khan may directly steal the money instead of giving cattle and horses. However, if it is a long-term business, it can't be done this way. After all, the annual profits are huge. Besides, cattle and horses are really worthless in the Crimean Khanate. By the way, please write a letter of agreement to form an alliance with Lithuania, so that I can report to the Grand Duke of Lithuania when I return. Why should we form an alliance with Lithuania? Munkajee Khan said that there was no problem with attacking Ryazan, but he was not very happy about the written alliance with Lithuania. Because, in this way, he would be embarrassed to send troops to rob the Ukrainian steppes controlled by Lithuania in the future. After all, they are allies. Khan, if you don't form an alliance with Lithuania, how can the cattle and horses purchased by my Chamber of Commerce from you pass through the Lithuanian border? The other party will definitely not be happy. After all, they are also a major producer of cattle and horses. That's true. Thinking of the money brought by the cattle and horse trade, which seemed to be much more than robbing on the Ukrainian steppes, Mungajir Khan finally wrote a letter of willingness to form an alliance with Lithuania. In this way, as long as the Grand Duke Alexander of Lithuania writes another letter and returns it to the Crimean Khanate, the alliance between the two countries will be completed. When Khan, at the instruction of Marin, put the big box containing 40,000 gold coins as a deposit in front of Mungajir Khan and opened it, Mungajir Khan and the Tatar nobles next to him were blinded by the 40,000 glittering gold coins in the box. Okay, this Khan will order people to gather troops and send troops to Ryazan. However, Your Excellency, please send the remaining 50,000 gold coins as soon as possible. Don't worry, Khan. However, please choose the best for the 1,000 war horses. And, for the 10,000 cattle, please choose the healthy and fat ones. Don't worry, Your Excellency, what we have the most on the Kipchak steppe is horses and oxen. As long as you have money, you can have as many as you want. Seeing that Mungajir Khan really began to gather elite soldiers from all over the country, Marin breathed a sigh of relief. He knew that his mission was accomplished. Moreover, Marin had exceeded the task. Originally, Marin was going to give away 100,000 gold coins for free. However, he did not expect that the Crimeans were more interested in selling livestock for a long time. So he temporarily changed his strategy and changed the free money to long-term purchase of livestock. Anyway, the livestock of the Crimean Khanate is very cheap. In this way, although Marin will pay 100,000 gold coins to the Crimean Khanate, but in exchange for 1,000 Eastern European Mongolian horses, Don horses, and 10,000 cows, he did not lose money at all. Because, if you take the 10,000 cows alone and sell them in the German region, you can sell them at double the price. All in all, Marin can still make a lot of money. The best thing is that Marin did not pay for this money himself, but his allies paid it. In other words, he got 1,000 war horses and 10,000 cows for free without spending a penny. When he sold 10,000 cows in Germany, the huge profits would belong to him. In short, Marin's mission not only achieved the strategic goal of attacking the Grand Duchy of Moscow and forcing it to withdraw its troops from Finland, but also made a lot of money. Even if he didn't steal 50,000 gold coins from his allies, he could earn at least 70,000 to 80,000 gold coins from the 10,000 cows, which was killing two birds with one stone. Chapter 115 Great Khan, I want to buy a Mao Mei. Originally, Marin was happily planning to leave Bakkizere with the envoys and guards and return to the Danish battlefield. But when leaving the city, Marin accidentally saw a group of Crimean cavalry driving a group of tied people into Bakkizere. Who are these people? Lithuanian Deputy Envoy Victor looked at the group of tied men and women in confusion. They are Slavic slaves captured by the Crimean cavalry. Marin suddenly almost jumped off his horse. Slaves, slave trade. Mao Mei. Damn, I almost forgot. So he immediately turned his horse's head and returned to Bakkizere, and asked the rest of the envoy team to stay on the spot, and only took Khan back to the Khan's palace. Hearing that the envoy had turned back, Mungajir Khan was surprised, but he still summoned Marin. After all, Marin's North Sea Chamber of Commerce is now the god of wealth of the Crimean Khanate. Meet the Khan. After entering the Khan's palace, Marin hurriedly saluted. Mungajir Khan was also nervous about Marin's sudden return, fearing that Marin would go back on his word and stop buying cattle and sheep from the Crimean Khanate in the future. Your Excellency, I wonder why you suddenly turned back. It's like this, the Khan is about to march into the Principality of Ryazan. After this battle, we should capture a lot of slaves, right? Of course, the Principality of Ryazan has a population of more than 100,000, and there are more than 10,000 people in the city of Ryazan alone. If we break through the city of Ryazan and clean up other parts of the Principality of Ryazan, it should be no problem to capture 10,000 or 20,000 young men, women and children. Mungajir Khan was also very clear about the situation in the Principality of Ryazan. Very good, I wonder how the Khan will sell the slaves after he captures them. Marin asked casually. Well, if we capture 10,000 or 20,000 slaves, I don't know if we can sell them all. Mungajir Khan suddenly felt distressed when he thought of this. Although the port of Kaffa exported slaves on a large scale, it could only export a few thousand slaves each year, mainly to Turkey. However, if the Turks are not willing to buy more, so many people captured this time may not be sold. How about I help the Khan digest some? This is Marin's speaking skills. He clearly wanted to help his subordinates buy Mao Mei, but he said he was helping Mungajir Khan digest the inventory. Really? Mungajir Khan was worried about the sale of slaves, and Marin offered to help digest, which surprised Mungajir Khan. Of course, Khan, can I still lie to you? Then how many slaves does your envoy's Chamber of Commerce want? What kind of slaves do you want? Munkyur Khan asked excitedly. Mainly young and strong women who can do farm work. Of course, young and beautiful girls are also needed. As for the quantity, I'm not sure. I'll go back and ask for instructions, probably a few thousand or so. Thousands? Excuse me, what does your envoy want so many women for? The demand that Marin said also shocked Munkyur Khan. Generally speaking, the number of people trafficked in the Crimean Khanate each year is only a few thousand, not more than 10,000. Marin asked for thousands of female slaves, which shocked Munkyur Khan. Now, Munkyur Khan suspected that Marin was a liar. Because the other party was so good to the Crimean Khanate, helping to solve various problems. It's like this. In our place, the cost of marriage for young men is very high now. The house price is so expensive. The woman not only wants a house, but also a car, a carriage. So, it's difficult for those young men to get married. It just so happens that I heard that the price of Eastern European female slaves is cheap here, only a few gold coins each. Our Chamber of Commerce plans to set up a subsidiary engaged in matchmaking business, specializing in trafficking women back from Crimea and selling them to those bachelors as wives. Marin said nonsense casually. What he said was clearly the situation in China before the crossing. Munkyur Khan really believed it, because he didn't know the specific situation in Western Europe, and at most knew a little about Lithuania. As for the social situation in Western Europe, he naturally didn't understand. Besides, why should he know that? As long as someone is willing to buy his slaves, it's fine. I see. But, envoy, the ones that cost a few gold coins each are for married women. Munkyur Khan kindly reminded. The Muslims attach great importance to women's chastity, and the price difference between young girls and women is very large. But in Christian areas, these have never been taken seriously. In the eyes of traditional Christians, they only look down on those unmarried women who indulge in promiscuity, but never look down on married women. Because, promiscuous before marriage is not in accordance with religious rules, and will go to hell after death. Married women are generally poor women whose husbands have died or have been abandoned by their husbands. They are not wrong and have not violated religious rules. Therefore, in Europe, it is normal to marry widows, especially those wealthy widows. If there are noble widows with large fiefdoms, they will be more popular, and the king will come to pursue them. This is not a problem. For those poor young people, women and girls are almost the same. Of course, it is best not to find the husbands of women. Don't worry about this. When we robbed those women, most of their husbands were killed. There is no trouble. After hearing this, Marin felt cold all over. It was indeed a robber nation. Not only did they rob other people's women, but they also killed their husbands. It was so vicious. However, it seems that he was also very vicious to participate in the slave trade. Okay, we mainly plan to buy young women, and also some young girls. However, they can't look ugly. Marin has actually made up his mind. Now, there are many immigrants in East Frisia. Most of them are poor young bachelors. Because the population of the previous manor could not be carried, they were driven out of the manor by the original manor owner and forced to wander around looking for work. However, finding a job is not so easy. After all, it is an agricultural society now, and handicrafts are not very developed. Only a small number of people can find work. Many people can't find work, so they either beg, starve to death, or make a living as bandits. Marin recruited a large number of young bachelors who had no work to serve as serfs. For these people, surviving was originally a problem, and it was good enough to marry a wife. Who would care whether the wife was a girl or a woman? Therefore, Marin bought a large number of young women, which was actually prepared for those newly recruited bachelor serfs. Moreover, the price of young women is much cheaper than that of young girls. Marin bought not one or two, but hundreds and thousands. If all girls were bought, the cost would be twice as much. For example, a young woman with a good appearance costs 6 gold coins each. And a young girl with a good appearance costs as much as 11 or 12 gold coins. The price of a beautiful girl is more than 15 gold coins. Marin has done his best to help those bachelor serfs buy wives. You know, even in the 21st century, no national government will find a partner for single young people. Therefore, even if young women are found for those bachelors, it is very worthy of them. Moreover, Marin specifically requested to select those with better looks, worth 6 gold coins. Marin did not even buy those ugly young women who only cost 4 gold coins. In addition, Marin also planned to get a group of beautiful Russian women to go to America to develop colonies together. Russian women are very beautiful when they are young. After the age of 30, although they are not beautiful anymore, they are tall and strong and can work very well. Sending them to the American colonies is just right to help those immigrants with farm work. After all, most of those who are willing to go to the colonies now are young people who can't make it. Generally, local girls in East Frisia are not willing to marry those immigrants and go to the colonies to suffer together. Only these beautiful Russian women, because they were sold as slaves and had no choice, would go to the American colonies, marry those immigrants, and work with their new husbands to develop America together. As for Marin's proposal, he also needed a group of beautiful mousy girls, mainly to reward the soldiers in the army. The soldiers in the army worked hard for Marin, so they naturally couldn't use women to fool around. Those who made military achievements could use beautiful girls as rewards. Before, Marin sent art to Naples, Italy, to exchange food for beautiful Italian refugee beauties. After all, Naples has been in chaos for the past 2 years, and farmland has been barren, so many girls can't eat. Originally, Marin planned to recruit 20,000 to 30,000 young women in Naples to marry his soldiers. However, after Art recruited the first batch of 2,000 beautiful girls and the second batch of 8,000 Italian girls, France and Spain, which divided the Kingdom of Naples, discovered Art's actions and prohibited Art from continuing to exchange food for beauties in Naples. Because France and Spain were afraid that Art would use food to abduct all the girls in the Kingdom of Naples. In that case, the young men of the Kingdom of Naples will not be able to find wives and give birth to offspring in the future. And the number of citizens who pay taxes to the two countries will be reduced in the future. Just like that, Marin's original plan fell through. And 10,000 Italian girls are not enough for his soldiers to share. Those who are willing to be mercenaries and exchange their lives for money are basically young bachelors and poor boys. Therefore, most of the 25,000 mercenaries under Marin's command, including 5,000 people sent to Italy, are bachelors. 10,000 Italian girls are not enough to share. Therefore, when Marin came to the Crimean Khanate this time, he thought that he could buy Maumei for his men to be wives. Of course, for those soldiers who have made military exploits, women cannot be used casually. Beautiful girls are considered high-end rewards, and they can also inspire the enthusiasm and desire in the hearts of soldiers. In short, mousy beautiful women are used to be wives for serfs. Of course, those soldiers who have no military exploits can also choose mousy beautiful women as wives. And those soldiers who have made military achievements can get beautiful mousy girls as wives based on their military achievements. However, in order to specifically pit Russia and stimulate the Crimeans, Marin proposed to only buy women from the Russian countries, and not buy female slaves from other Eastern European countries such as Lithuanians and Romanians. In this way, if the Crimean Khanate wants to get Marin's orders, it will have to go to the Grand Duchy of Moscow to rob mousy girls. In this way, the Grand Duchy of Moscow will be rotated by the wolf cubs of the Crimean Khanate every year. Want to rise? Destroy the Crimean Khanate first. Although Munkhjir Khan was not satisfied with Marin's request. However, it is good that someone can buy their slaves in large quantities. Even if he is the Khan, Munkhjir Khan is not good at interfering with other people's choices. At most, I will go to Moscow and Ryazan to rob more in the future. Before leaving, Marin suddenly proposed, Khan, please give me the flag of Crimea and customs documents. Huh? Your Excellency, what do you want our flag and customs documents for? Munkhjir Khan was puzzled. It's like this, Khan. To buy slaves, we plan to transport them by sea. The ships need to go through the Turkish Straits and pass through the Turkish territory. The Khan's country is an ally of Turkey. So I think the Turks will accept your flag and customs documents, right? Of course they will accept it. The Crimean Khanate is Turkey's younger brother. The Turks also rely on the Crimean Khanate to help suppress the Slavs in Eastern Europe, so they will naturally not refuse the Crimean Khanate's face. If they get the customs documents of the Crimean Khanate, they will not be embarrassed to go through the Turkish Straits. Why not take the land route of Lithuania? Munkhjir Khan was a little puzzled. You know, the cattle and horse trade that was previously agreed upon had to go through the Lithuanian land route. The Khan doesn't know that in our Western Europe, the Holy See prohibits the open sale of slaves. Therefore, the slave trade must be done quietly. And, as you know, in the eyes of the Roman Catholic Church, you green religions are pagans. If I openly cooperate with you on land and sell Slavic Christians as slaves, I will be punished by the Holy See. In fact, although the Roman Catholic Church is corrupt, it is also kind because of Christian doctrine. Moreover, Christianity has always been opposed to slavery and slave trade, including the slave trade. However, later Protestantism rose, Catholicism was defeated, and the majesty of the Roman Catholic Church was lost. Later, European countries did not take the Holy See seriously and sold black slaves on their own. The Roman Catholic Church had no way to deal with this. However, the current Roman Catholic Church is still very authoritative. Before Alexander VI died and his father-in-law came to power, Marin could not openly sell Eastern European female slaves. If Alexander VI knew about it, he would be in big trouble. Even if he bought cattle and horses from the Crimean Khanate, Marin planned to use the name of the North Sea Chamber of Commerce. Because, on the surface, the North Sea Chamber of Commerce is a chamber of commerce run by Jews and has nothing to do with Marin. Even if something goes wrong, Marin will not be implicated. At most, he can create a new vest and a new chamber of commerce. Therefore, Marin asked for the flag and customs clearance documents of the Crimean Khanate to ensure that his merchant ships would pass through the Mediterranean and the Black Sea to reach the slave export port of the Crimean Khanate, Kaffa, to buy slaves. After all, the sea is not as crowded as on land. As long as you don't use your own flag, no one can find out that you are selling slaves. After listening to Marin's explanation, Munkagayar Khan expressed his understanding. So he presented Marin with 4 flags of the Crimean Khanate and signed a customs clearance document in person. The document was written in Arabic, which is commonly used in the Muslim world. Even the Turks could understand it. After getting the flag and the customs document, Marin really left this time. He took Khan back to the city gate, joined the original team, and set off on the journey home together. Chapter 116, Salt Trade Order. During this mission to the Crimean Khanate, Marin can be said to have completed his mission gloriously. Just as Marin left Bakhchisarai, the capital of the Crimean Khanate, with his guards, the first batch of about 4,000 vanguard cavalry of the Crimean Khanate had already roared northward. Each of the 4,000 Tatar cavalrymen who served as the vanguard had 3 horses. Moreover, a large number of sacks and ropes were placed on the horses' backs. Marin curiously inquired, and the Tatar officer told Marin that the sacks were used to hold the stolen property, and the ropes were used to tie people. Marin looked at the 4,000-man professional robber team with admiration, and felt that the other party was indeed professional. Moreover, a country is very professional and familiar with the business of kidnapping and robbery. Seeing that the temporary ally Crimeans, robbery, were so professional, Marin was finally relieved. As long as the Crimean Khanate attacked the Principality of Ryazan, which had already been subordinate to the Grand Duchy of Moscow, the Crimeans and the Mauzi would definitely turn against each other. Because Ryazan is the southeastern gateway of Moscow, the Crimean Khanate's army is approaching, and the elite troops sent by the Grand Duchy of Moscow to Finland will have to retreat temporarily. Because the troops left behind in Moscow alone are no match for the Crimean cavalry. Only the 20,000 elite standing army can dare to say that they can stop the cavalry of the Crimean Khanate. Other conscripts, on the battlefield, are estimated to be defeated by a charge of the Crimean cavalry. After entering the territory of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, Marin first took the team to Vilnius to return the 500 cavalry sent by the Lithuanians. In fact, these 500 cavalry did not enter the Crimean Khanate at all, but were arranged to wait at the border. However, Marin went to Vilnius not only to return the cavalry, but also to urge Grand Duke Alexander to complete the return of the letter of credence to Munkagyi Khan. In this way, the status of the alliance between the two sides can be determined in writing. At the Vilnius palace, Grand Duke Alexander and Prince Sigmund were overjoyed when they heard that Marin had successfully persuaded the Crimean Khanate to send troops. Apart from anything else, as long as the Crimean Khanate and the Grand Duchy of Moscow fell out, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania would not have to worry about being attacked from both sides by Moscow and the Crimeans. If facing the Grand Duchy of Moscow alone, Lithuania could not say that it could beat the opponent, but at least when focusing on defense, it could still withstand the attack of the Muscovites. Therefore, in the eyes of Grand Duke Alexander and Prince Sigmund, as long as the alliance between the Crimean Khanate and the Grand Duchy of Moscow could be broken, it would be a great success. As for getting the Crimean Khanate to send troops, they had never expected it. However, what they did not expect was that Marin's words about persuading the Crimean Khanate to send troops actually came true. Although the Crimean Khanate sent troops to attack the Principality of Ryazan, Grand Duke Alexander and Prince Sigmund both understood that the Principality of Ryazan was the gateway to Moscow and an important granary for the Grand Duchy of Moscow. Moreover, on the surface, the Principality of Ryazan is already a vassal state of the Grand Duchy of Moscow. Attacking Ryazan, although not a direct attack on Moscow, is almost the same as attacking Moscow. In this way, the Grand Duchy of Moscow and the Crimean Khanate will definitely fall out. From now on, the Muscovites will probably waste a lot of troops to guard against the invasion of the Crimeans on the southern steppes. In order to facilitate defense, the Muscovites will even spend a lot of money to build a large number of fortresses on the southern border as a support for resisting the invasion of the Crimeans. There is no problem in exchanging letters and concluding an alliance with the Crimean Khanate. Grand Duke Alexander quickly signed the document and ordered the deputy envoy Victor, who had just been to Bakhchisaray, to deliver the letter. However, when the Crimean Khanate sent troops, Grand Duke Alexander and his younger brother Prince Sigismund had a dispute over whether the Grand Duchy of Lithuania should send troops to respond. Prince Sigismund believed that they should take advantage of this great opportunity to send troops to retake several cities in northeastern Ukraine that were previously ceded by the Grand Duchy of Moscow. But Grand Duke Alexander seemed to be frightened and a little afraid, saying that it was better to sit on the mountain and watch the fight. The two brothers quarreled in front of Marin. Marin shook his head, feeling that Grand Duke Alexander was indeed cowardly. It would be fine if it was in the past. The Crimean Khanate sent troops on a large scale at this time and also concluded a formal alliance with Lithuania. Not sending troops at this time would be a complete waste of a great opportunity. However, who asked that the Grand Duke of Lithuania at this time was Grand Duke Alexander, instead of the more strategic Sigismund I? Marin was unable to influence Grand Duke Alexander's decision, and could only drink the Earl Grey milk tea that had become popular among the upper class of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania in a depressed mood, thinking about things while drinking. Thinking about this time when he returned, he had to pass through the Teutonic Kingdom and return the borrowed horses to Grand Master Philip. Marin suddenly screamed and put down the teacup. Grand Duke Alexander and Prince Sigmund, who were arguing, were interrupted by Marin's scream, and then they looked at Marin in confusion. Marin just suddenly remembered that it seemed that his ally, the Teutonic Knights, was currently in a hostile relationship with the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and Poland. Moreover, although Lithuania and Poland were defeated by the Muscovites, they still had the upper hand in the face of the weaker Teutonic Kingdom, and kept cleaning up the Teutonic Kingdom. Now that Marin has established such a good relationship with the Teutonic state, Marin decided to help the Teutonic state make peace and persuade Alexander, the Grand Duke of Lithuania and the King of Poland, to give up suppressing the Teutonic state and concentrate on dealing with the Grand Duchy of Moscow. So, Marin first said that in order to make the Crimeans send troops and turn against the Grand Duchy of Moscow, he had to bleed heavily, and decided to let one of his chambers of commerce sign a trade agreement with the Crimean Khanate to purchase 10,000 cattle and thousands of war horses from the country every year. These livestock will pass through the Lithuanian border, and I hope that Grand Duke Alexander will cooperate. Grand Duke Alexander and Prince Sigmund were a little unhappy, because the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, which controls the Ukrainian steppe, is also a place rich in cattle and sheep. Marin and the Crimean Khanate's purchase of cattle and horses is obviously giving money to the Crimeans. It would be great if the order was given to Lithuania. However, Grand Duke Alexander and Prince Sigmund both understood that this was an important condition for the Crimean Khanate to agree to an alliance with Lithuania. If the Grand Duchy of Lithuania obstructs this transaction and prohibits the Crimean Khanate's cattle and horses from passing through the border, the Crimean Khanate may turn against Lithuania on the spot and become an enemy of Lithuania again. Therefore, although he was reluctant, Grand Duke Alexander agreed to Marin's Chamber of Commerce. After purchasing the cattle and horses of the Crimean Khanate, they passed through Lithuania and only had to pay a small transit tax. Then, Marin mentioned the issue of salt trade. Lithuania is an Eastern European country, and the main part is in the Baltic region in northern Eastern Europe. Obviously, this is also a region with high salt prices. Lithuania has a population of several million, plus such a high salt price. It would be strange if Marin didn't envy this big market. Moreover, Marin has always believed that an alliance of interests is the most solid alliance between countries. Before, Marin sent people to inquire that although the Jagiellonian dynasty was powerful and monopolized the thrones of the Kingdom of Bohemia, the Kingdom of Hungary, the Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, this family was not rich. Because, although these four countries are all powerful, their commerce is not very developed. Speaking of which, the most developed region is the Kingdom of Bohemia. Therefore, Grand Duke Alexander and Prince Sigismund's eldest brother chose the throne of the smaller Kingdom of Bohemia and the Kingdom of Hungary, and gave up the throne of Poland and the Grand Duke of Lithuania. The main reason is that although the Kingdom of Bohemia is small, its commerce is relatively developed. With developed commerce, more commercial taxes can be collected. With more taxes, life will be more comfortable. Although the Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania are large in area and seem to be very powerful, in fact, Poland and Lithuania are two countries with developed agriculture and animal husbandry. However, agriculturally developed countries have many feudal nobles. Many benefits were divided up by those feudal nobles. The benefits in the hands of the royal family are not much. Therefore, although Grand Duke Alexander is the Grand Duke of Lithuania with a population of millions and the King of Poland with a population of millions, his actual benefits are not as good as his brother Vladislav, for who won the throne of the Kingdom of Bohemia. Seeing that Grand Duke Alexander treasured a brick of tea worth a horse, Marin could imagine that the other party was not rich. So, Marin first asked Grand Duke Alexander and Prince Sigmund about the background of the merchants who currently monopolized the salt trade in Lithuania. Grand Duke Alexander knew nothing about it, but Prince Sigmund knew it. He told Marin that the monopoly of the salt trade in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania was mainly the Danes and the Hanseatic merchants of the Livonian Order. Speaking of which, the Livonian Order was ostensibly a vassal of the Teutonic Order. However, since the defeat of the Teutonic Corps by the Polish-Lithuanian coalition in the Battle of Tannenberg, it has gradually become independent with the secret support of the Lithuanians. However, it still maintains the status of a vassal of the Teutonic state on the surface. But in fact, they are completely independent. The Grand Master of the Livonian Order, who was elected each term, did not go to Königsberg to report and swear an oath. All this was done secretly by the Lithuanians. Therefore, the Livonian Order, after independence, had a good relationship with Lithuania. Although it belonged to the Hanseatic League, its relationship with the Hanseatic League was somewhat distant. Before, because the Teutonic Knights were the most important ally of the Hanseatic League in the Baltic region, the Lithuanians and Poles were not very cold to the Hanseatic League, the ally of the Teutonic state. Therefore, the Lithuanians and Poles gave a large number of salt orders to the Danes, the rivals of the Hanseatic League. And the Danes' source of salt was mainly from the British, with whom they had a good relationship, transported by merchant ships. After all, the British already knew how to use coal to cook salt at this time. In addition to not knowing how to use energy-saving stoves and wash away the brine to reduce the bitterness, the British also made a fortune from selling salt. Most of the Hanseatic League's salt came from the salt mines in Lüneburg, and the cost was also very low. However, the mineral salt in Lüneburg did not taste very good. Marin was naturally very unhappy when he heard that the salt trade between Lithuania and Poland was mostly monopolized by the Danes. In addition, Denmark was his enemy, so Marin made a decisive decision to grab business. So, Marin told Grand Duke Alexander and Prince Sigmund that the Danish fleet was annihilated and many Danish merchant ships were robbed by the coalition forces. Obviously, after losing the merchant ships, the Danes also temporarily lost the ability to transport salt. Count Marin, won't you return the captured merchant ships to Denmark after the war? Grand Duke Alexander was a little confused. According to the unspoken rules among European nobles, any captured people and property should be returned as long as the ransom is paid. And if Marin and the Hanseatic League robbed all the Danish merchant ships, Lithuania and Poland would have to consider stopping trade with Denmark and changing agents. Otherwise, the trade would not go on. Yes, Your Excellency, you don't understand, even if I am willing to return the merchant ships, Lübeck and Hamburg will never agree. Because the purpose of launching this war is to comprehensively strike Denmark's maritime trade and seize the share of maritime trade. I dare say that even if Lübeck and Hamburg burn those merchant ships, they will not return them to Denmark. Grand Duke Alexander and Prince Sigmund were silent, and it was obvious that they had figured it out. In recent years, the Danes have vigorously developed maritime trade, making it clear that they want to grab the interests of the Hanseatic League. Therefore, the people of Lübeck and Hamburg must hate Denmark as a trade rival. Originally, the trade markets of Lithuania and Poland were monopolized by the Hanseatic League. However, since Queen Margaret I established the Kalmar League and began to compete with the Hanseatic League in maritime trade, the trade interests of the Hanseatic League in the Baltic region have been greatly affected. Even because of the issue of the Teutonic Knights, Lithuania and Poland have a bad relationship with the Hanseatic League. For this reason, Lithuania and Poland also handed over a large number of orders for salt and other commodities to the Danes. However, that was in the past. Obviously, through this war, the Danes are finished. Their warships and many merchant ships were robbed by the fierce Lübeck and Hamburg. In the future, the Danes will need many years to recover if they want to engage in maritime trade. However, the salt trade between Lithuania and Poland can't wait. After all, people need to eat salt every day. The Danes can spend many years to recover, but the millions of people in Lithuania and Poland can't wait. Without salt, people will get sick. So, from the moment the Danish fleet was annihilated, Lithuania and Poland were destined to change salt merchants. Moreover, Marin expressed his willingness to hand over the agency sales rights of Lithuania and Poland to Grand Duke Alexander and give up some profits. Thinking of the salt consumption of millions of people in the two countries, Grand Duke Alexander was really moved. So, Grand Duke Alexander and Marin signed a super large order for salt trade of 500,000 quarters per year, a total of 6.35 million kilograms, 12.7 kilograms per quarter. The preferential price that Marin sold to Grand Duke Alexander was 9 shillings per quarter, and the average profit per quarter of salt was about 8 shillings. 500,000 quarters of salt, the profit was as high as 4 million shillings, that is, 800,000 gold coins. In fact, such a large amount is less than half of the salt consumption of Lithuania and Poland. However, Grand Duke Alexander did not dare to ask for more shares. Because the nobles below also want benefits. The Danish salt trade was abolished, and the salt trade in Lithuania and Poland must be reshuffled. That is, Grand Duke Alexander took the opportunity to sell it while everyone was still not reacting, and grabbed nearly half of the salt share. The other half of the share must be left to the nobles to divide. Otherwise, if he dared to eat alone, Grand Duke Alexander could not be sure whether he would be hacked to death by those angry nobles. For the same reason, the salt trade market in Lithuania and Poland was empty. It was not only Marin who had this idea, but also Lübeck and Hamburg. If Marin dared to take over this market, he would also be hated by Lübeck and Hamburg. Therefore, he only dared to swallow less than half of the market. The rest had to be given to Lübeck and Hamburg. Even if he swallowed less than half of the share, Marin did not dare to use his own flag. In the future, when transporting salt, Marin would have to be sneaky, and even use the British flag to avoid angering Lübeck and Hamburg. In fact, because the price of salt in Eastern Europe was super expensive, Marin made such a huge profit. Once the salt was in the hands of Grand Duke Alexander, it could also bring him a profit of more than 100,000 gold coins per year. It is worth mentioning that this was not fiscal revenue, but the private income of the Jagiellonian royal family. It was not until the super-large contract for salt trade was negotiated that Marin suddenly remembered, I was obviously trying to intercede for the Teutonic Kingdom, why did I go off topic and talk about salt trade? However, this topic went off topic well, and it turned out to be a super-large contract with an annual income of 800,000 gold coins. Chapter 117, Mediation on behalf of the Teutonic State. Marin finally remembered that he had helped his ally, Grand Master Philip, to make peace with Poland and Lithuania, and began to think about how to start. The Teutonic Knights were very miserable at the moment. Under the joint attack of Poland and Lithuania, the Teutonic Knights, which once had an area of more than 100,000 square kilometers and a population of 1 million, now only had 36,900 square kilometers of land and 300,000 people. Although the Livonian Knights had a larger area and a large population, it also broke away from the control of the Teutonic Knights with the support of Lithuania. Moreover, the Teutonic Knights were not stable at the moment. With the support of Poland and Lithuania, the local Prussian nobles of the Teutonic Knights fought openly and secretly with the Teutonic Knights for control of the Teutonic state. For now, the 4 Hanseatic cities, Königsberg, Elbing, Thorn and Mermel, are under the control of more than 800 formal Teutonic Knights and thousands of reserved Teutonic Knights. These 4 cities are also the richest places in the Teutonic state and can obtain a lot of commercial taxes. However, in the countryside of the Teutonic state, it was the local Prussian nobles who had the upper hand. Only in the areas surrounding the 4 Hanseatic cities could the Teutonic Knights suppress the Prussian rural land nobles. Speaking of which, these Prussian land nobles originally had no ability to confront the Teutonic Knights. However, they had the support of the Lithuanians behind them. Therefore, although they were not as rich as the Teutonic Knights, the Prussian nobles in the countryside, with the support of Lithuania and Poland, received a lot of financial and military support, and had enough power to confront the Teutonic Knights. Even though they were at a disadvantage in the struggle, they also interfered with the Teutonic Knights' control over the rural areas outside the 4 Hanseatic cities. The Teutonic Knights had superior financial resources and military strength, but they just couldn't destroy the local Prussian nobles. Because, whenever the Teutonic Knights reorganized their army and planned to destroy those rural Prussian nobles, Poland and Lithuania would also gather their armies to threaten the borders of the Teutonic Knights and hinder the Knights from exterminating those rural Prussian nobles who opposed the Knights. When Marin took advantage of the opportunity when Grand Duke Alexander was happy because he won a large order that earned hundreds of thousands of gold coins a year, Marin proposed a request for Lithuania and the Teutonic Knights to reconcile. Count Marin, why do you mediate for the Teutonic Knights? Grand Duke Alexander asked curiously. Because the current Grand Master of the Teutonic State, Philip, is my ally. Ally? Yes, when I first became the Count of East Frisia, it was the Teutonic State and the Principality of Cleve where Grand Master Philip was located that first recognized my status and formed an alliance with me. So, I am very grateful to him. This sentence was not completely true. In fact, The reason why Marin supported Prince Philip to become the Grand Master and formed an alliance with him was purely to destroy the good deeds of Friedrich, the third son of Duke Albrecht of Saxony, and to prevent the Duchy of Saxony from becoming too powerful after having the Teutonic Kingdom as an ally. Grand Duke Alexander did not make a decision immediately, but started to discuss quietly with his younger brother Prince Sigmund in Lithuanian dialect. The discussion lasted for a long time, and there was a dispute, and there seemed to be a big disagreement. Marin did not understand the Lithuanian dialect, so he could only stare blankly. However, the debate over there was fierce, and it seemed that the situation was not good. So, Marin turned his eyes and decided to put some pressure on it. Grand Duke, when I came, I passed by Königsberg and seemed to see the envoy of the Grand Duchy of Moscow go to Königsberg. I don't know what it's for. Could it be that the Muscovites want to form an alliance with the Teutons and attack from the east and west? In fact, when Marin came, there were indeed envoys from the Grand Duchy of Moscow who went to the Teutonic Kingdom, but they were not there to discuss an alliance, but to deal with a trade dispute. Because the Hanseatic merchants of the Livonian Order and the merchants of the Grand Duchy of Moscow had a conflict because of a huge commercial dispute in the Livonian Order. The people of Moscow thought that the Teutonic state was the sovereign of the Livonian Order and had the right to arbitrate, so they foolishly came to Königsberg to seek arbitration. But in fact, the Livonian Order had already been independent in fact, but only nominally recognized the Teutonic state as the sovereign. In other words, the Russian envoys made a wasted trip this time. So, Marin simply used the visit of the Russian envoys to Königsberg to bluff the Lithuanians. Although the Teutonic state was in decline, it could still gather tens of thousands of troops, and the proportion of heavy cavalry was very high. If it really formed an alliance with the Grand Duchy of Moscow, it would also be a huge trouble for Lithuania. Grand Duke Alexander and Prince Sigmund's faces changed, and Grand Duke Alexander asked, did they reach an agreement? It seems not. Marin pretended to think about it, and then answered. The reason why he said this was just to tell the Lithuanians that if the Teutonic Kingdom turned to Moscow, it would bring great trouble to the Lithuanians, not to tell them that the Teutonic Kingdom had really allied with Moscow. This was just a way of exerting pressure. Grand Duke Alexander breathed a sigh of relief, and discussed with his brother in Lithuanian dialect for a long time. Marin said again, Captain Philip is also my trading partner. Every year, he makes a lot of profit from the sale of salt. This news was hinting that Grand Duke Alexander Captain Philip was also a rich man and was able to recruit more troops. In fact, Grand Captain Philip did recruit 10,000 new troops, intending to rely on this new army to control the Teutonic Kingdom and suppress the native Prussian nobles. Grand Duke Alexander and Prince Sigmund seemed to be shocked. After a while, Grand Duke Alexander and Prince Sigmund seemed to have discussed the result. So, Grand Duke Alexander said to Marin, Lithuania agrees to reconcile with the Teutonic state in principle and promises not to interfere in the internal affairs of the Teutonic state. However, that is limited to the Teutonic state. As for the Livonian Order, we do not want to see it being influenced and controlled by the Teutonic state again. Obviously, this is the bottom line of the Lithuanians. Marin thought about it and felt that this was already very good for the Teutonic state. Indeed, if the Teutonic state and the Livonian Order merged, it would definitely become a powerful force. If it were Marin himself, he would not be able to tolerate such a powerful country by his side. Therefore, Lithuania's request was not excessive. Therefore, Marin planned to bring this condition of the Grand Duke of Lithuania to the Grand Master of the Teutonic state, Philip. As long as Philip agreed and signed a reconciliation treaty with Lithuania, he would have the opportunity to deal with the opposition nobles in the Teutonic state. Because Grand Duke Alexander is not only the Grand Duke of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, but also the King of the Kingdom of Poland. As long as Grand Duke Alexander promised not to interfere in the internal affairs of the Teutonic state, the Teutonic Knights would be able to free up their hands to deal with the local nobles who were at odds with the Knights, and would not be subject to armed intervention from Poland and Lithuania. And all the Teutonic state had to pay was a promise not to ally with the Grand Duchy of Moscow. Marin believed that as long as Grand Master Philip was not brain dead, he would definitely accept this condition that was beneficial to the Teutonic state. Although it was impossible to regain control of the Livonian Order, in fact, the Livonian Order had long been out of the control of the Teutonic state. It didn't really matter whether to agree to this condition or not. As long as the Prussian nobles in the country were dealt with, the Teutonic state could truly be regarded as a country belonging to the Knights, and it would be able to develop more stably. Unlike now, the cities and the surrounding areas belonged to the Teutonic Knights, while most of the other rural areas of the Teutonic state belonged to the Prussian nobles. With the conditions offered by Grand Master Alexander, Marin continued on his way home, and by the way, conveyed this condition to Grand Master Philip. Chapter 118, The Wool of the Teutonic Nation. After arriving in Königsberg, Marin told Grand Master Philip that he had interceded for the Teutonic Kingdom and suggested that Grand Master Philip quickly return the letter of credence to Lithuania and settle the matter. Because the Grand Duchy of Moscow has not been beaten badly by the Crimean Khanate, and the Lithuanians are still a little afraid of the Grand Duchy of Moscow. They are now also afraid that the Teutonic Kingdom and the Grand Duchy of Moscow will attack Lithuania from the east and west. Therefore, now is the best time to draft a treaty. If the Grand Duchy of Moscow is abused by the Crimean Khanate and the Lithuanians see the weakness of the Moscow people, they may not let the Teutonic Kingdom go. Therefore, Marin suggested that Grand Master Philip complete the exchange of treaties and the signing of the peace treaty as quickly as possible. Then, taking advantage of the opportunity when the new treaty has just been formed and the Lithuanians have not yet reacted, quickly suppress the Prussian nobles who were once supported by Lithuania and complete control of the Teutonic Kingdom. You know, although the Prussian nobles are not as powerful as the Teutonic Knights, the rural areas they control are much larger than the four Hanseatic cities mainly controlled by the Teutonic Knights. Basically, 50 kilometers away from the four Hanseatic cities, most of them are the territory of the Prussian nobles. The enclosure movement that Grand Master Philip had previously carried out at the suggestion of Marin also mainly occurred near the eastern border area. There is a wasteland over there, and there are not many Prussian nobles. Because the Prussian nobles are mostly concentrated near the coast and the big rivers. There are many wastelands in the inland areas. After all, the Teutonic state currently has a land area of 36,900 square kilometers, which is more than 10 times that of the East Frisian state. However, its population is only 300,000, which is twice that of the East Frisian state. Therefore, many areas in the Teutonic state are wastelands. Only near the Baltic Sea coast and some large river areas, agriculture is more developed and the population is more dense. However, the places occupied by those native Prussian nobles are all fertile plains and riverside areas, which are very suitable for agriculture. Many wastelands in the eastern region lack rivers around them, and water conservancy irrigation is inconvenient, so it is impossible to farm, but it is suitable for sheep grazing. Of course, if you are willing to spend money to dig ditches and canals, many plain areas in the inland can also be transformed into fertile fields. However, the investment is too large and it is not cost-effective. It can be said that the large riverbanks and fertile plains in the Teutonic state that are rich in grain are basically controlled by local Prussian nobles. Although these Prussian nobles are not as rich as the Teutonic Knights who control four Hanseatic cities, they have Lithuania and Poland as their backers, so they are not afraid of being eliminated by the Teutonic Knights. However, if the Teutonic state and Lithuania reach a compromise, these Prussian nobles will be equivalent to being sold. At that time, the Teutonic Knights will quickly dispatch a large army to sweep these local nobles, complete the control of large tracts of land in the Teutonic state, and truly control the entire economic lifeline of the Teutonic state. Philip, make peace with the Lithuanians as soon as possible. What are you still hesitating about? While the Grand Duchy of Moscow has not been defeated by the Crimean Khanate, you should take the opportunity to send troops immediately to capture all the Prussian nobles who are not obedient to the management in the territory. You must know that those Prussian nobles do not have a solid city to rely on, at most they have a few small castles. As long as you send out a large army, it is easy to sweep their manors. As for the castle, it can be conquered with some time. After all, the castle is not as difficult to conquer as a strong city. Grand Commander Philip was entangled, and after thinking about it, he said to Marin, "Marin, I know what you said is right, and I have also prepared 10,000 new troops. However, the Teutonic state is different from your East Frisian county. You can have the final say in the East Frisian county, but I need the authorization of the Teutonic Knights Assembly. Then hold a meeting soon. As long as you take the opportunity to destroy those Prussian nobles this time, the Teutonic Knights will be a stable and unified country in the future. In this way, you don't have to worry about domestic rebellion. Well, I will issue an order to summon all 800 Teutonic Knights to Königsberg for a meeting. That's it. By the way, Marin, you asked me to do some kind of enclosure movement in the eastern wasteland. Now, a few years have passed. I have also relied on the enclosure movement to win over thousands of wandering knights. The most important thing is that the sheep in the pastures occupied by the first batch of 300 wandering knights have become large-scale and have begun to produce wool on a large scale. Do you think? Is there any way to help me solve the problem of wool sales? Grand Master Philip rubbed his hands and looked at Marin expectantly. Marin only remembered at this time that 5 years ago, when Grand Master Philip had just become the Grand Master of the Teutonic Kingdom, he had suggested that he use the large amount of public wasteland in the inland areas of the Teutonic Kingdom to win over the German wandering knights who wandered to the Teutonic Kingdom, let them enclose the land to raise sheep, and then concentrate on shearing wool for foreign trade. Now, 5 years have passed, and Marin estimates that the sheep of Grand Master Philip's men have also reached a scale, and they can indeed engage in large-scale wool exports. So he asked, "Philip, are the sheep of your men coarse wool or fine wool? The finer the wool, the less valuable it is. Generally speaking, the fine wool of fine wool sheep is used to weave high-end wool textiles. And coarse wool is used to weave low-end wool textiles. For example, the white-bottomed black cross vests worn by each of Marin's soldiers were all made of coarse wool in order to save money. Well, in the past few years, I have been looking for fine wool sheep breeds. However, I have not been very successful. Because the best fine wool sheep are currently in Spain. The breed seems to be called merino sheep. But the Spanish regard this kind of sheep as a treasure and do not allow it to be exported at all. Whoever exports it will be killed, which is very scary. Therefore, we cannot import Spanish merino sheep. Therefore, we can only import it from England, another major producer of fine wool sheep. However, the British have also begun to control the export of fine wool sheep in recent years. It took me 5 years to get 500 British fine wool sheep through smuggling. Now, after breeding and expansion, it has reached a scale of 2,000. As for the other sheep, they are still local coarse wool sheep. 2,000, very good. By the way, what price do you plan to sell the wool at? Marin asked with concern. Helping Philip sell wool is not a problem, but the problem is that you have to make a profit. Otherwise, I wouldn't be that interested. Well, I plan to sell the fine wool of British fine wool sheep for 2 pfennigs per pound. As for coarse wool, 1 pfennig for 2 pounds. Very cheap. Marin exclaimed. You know, the British export wool at about 2,000 pence per bag, and each bag of wool weighs about 360 pounds. On average, the export price of each pound of wool is as high as 5.55 pence. However, this is not all. The British also impose a high wool export tax, 33 shillings and 4 pence per bag of wool, equivalent to 400 pence. In this way, the wool in the hands of foreign merchants is actually as high as 2,400 pence per bag. On average, the cost per pound is as high as 6.66 pence. Penny and pfennig are equivalent, that is, the price of British fine wool is as high as 6.66 pfennigs per pound. And Captain Philip priced British fine wool at 2 pfennigs per pound, which is not even 1/3 of the export price of British wool. It is indeed very cheap. It's a pity that the shipment volume is too small. After all, Teutonic State only has 2,000 British fine wool sheep. As for coarse wool, the European market generally has about 1.5 pfennigs per pound. Philip's offer is only 1/3 of the Western European market. There's no way, Marin, you know, Teutonic State is in Eastern Europe, and it's inconvenient to trade with Western Europe. It's also quite troublesome to transport Teutonic wool to Western Europe. If I don't take advantage of the price advantage, it will be difficult to gain the market. Marin nodded. Grand Commander Philip was also a smart man. Teutonic wool had just entered the market. If it did not take the low-price route to attract customers, it would not be able to open up sales at all. The most important thing was that Teutonic wool was not well known, and it could only rely on low-price dumping in the early stage to attract merchants to purchase. At present, there are 2,000 British fine wool sheep in the ranch of Grand Commander Philip and his men. However, there are more than 30,000 local sheep, and they are still increasing rapidly. The annual wool production is also tens of thousands of pounds. If, after this war, Philip could seize more serfs from the defeated Prussian nobles to help herd sheep, he and his men would have no problem raising hundreds of thousands of sheep, or even more. The reason why there are only more than 30,000 sheep now is mainly because there are not enough people to herd sheep. Suddenly, Marin remembered that since he could buy female slaves from the Crimeans, it seems that the Teutonic Kingdom can also buy shepherd slaves from the Crimeans. Marin told this idea to Grand Commander Philip, and Philip was very interested in this idea. However, he was also worried about how to transport slaves from the Crimean Khanate to the Teutonic Kingdom. The last question, does the Teutonic Kingdom impose export taxes on wool exports? Marin asked with concern. There is no fixed standard for export taxes, which are purely determined by the mood of each country. If the export tax is too high, the cost of the purchaser will also be greatly increased. No export tax has been imposed for the time being, because wool exports are still in the trial stage. When the time comes, the export tax rate will definitely be set. However, I am the Grand Commander and can reduce the export tax as much as possible. Well, try to set the wool export tax at about 10%. Marin breathed a sigh of relief, and his previous worries disappeared. If the Teutonic kingdoms will export tax is raised as high as that of the United Kingdom, and the export tax for foreign purchases is directly set at 40%, then the cost of wool procurement will be greatly increased. Adding long-distance freight, it will reach half of the price of British wool, which is extremely expensive. Fortunately, Philip himself is the Grand Master of the Teutonic Kingdom and can interfere with the formulation of export taxes, which is very good news. In fact, wool is in short supply in Europe now. In Flanders, the textile center of Europe, many wool spinning factories have closed down because of Britain's restrictions on wool exports. If I ship the wool from the Teutonic Kingdom to Flanders, it will definitely be very popular and I won't have to worry about not being able to sell it. Moreover, my own East Frisia has also begun to develop a small-scale wool spinning industry. However, the technology is not yet mature. Mainly, there is still room for improvement in wool washing and degreasing, as well as removing odors. After all, you can't take a wool textile out with the smell of sheep. When these technologies are perfected, Marin even plans to use textile artifacts such as the Jenny spinning machine and the flying shuttle. Therefore, it is a good idea to get a source of wool now. Chapter 119 Return to Copenhagen. After returning the horses borrowed from the Teutonic Kingdom, Marin boarded the ship returning to the Copenhagen front. In addition to the 200 men he brought before, there were also 100 Eastern European Mongolian horses presented by Monk Gile Khan. In order to load these horses, Grand Commander Philip also specially allocated a large number of Kirk sailing ships in the port of Königsberg to help transport the horses. However, Philip didn't understand why Marin would take a fancy to these short Eastern European Mongolian horses. Although the height of Eastern European Mongolian horses is much higher than that of the original Mongolian horses, the average shoulder height is more than 1.5 meters, which is already considered a medium-sized horse, but such horses are still unpopular in Europe. Because plate armor knights are popular in Europe. Most of the horses ridden by knights are about 1.6 meters and 1.7 meters high. The Eastern European Mongolian horses with a shoulder height of more than 1.5 meters are considered dwarfs in front of local European horses, and it is difficult to carry knights wearing full sets of plate armor. Marin didn't say anything. After all, his vision is completely different from that of people of this era. Although the Eastern European Mongolian horse is short, it is very suitable for light cavalry riding and is also very suitable for traveling and changing. Because, when it is not carrying people, it does not need to eat feed, and eating some grass is enough. Even if it is used for changing, after carrying people, it is enough to feed some soybeans or oats. If it is a long-distance journey and long-distance raid, this Mongolian horse is much stronger than the European horse. The characteristics of European horses are strong strength and explosive power, but poor endurance. Plate armor knights riding European horses will have no strength after charging for 2 rounds. However, the Eastern European Mongolian horse can eat for a long time. Although the short-term explosive power cannot catch up with those tall horses. However, relying on low cost and quantity advantages, plus the ability to run long distances, it is enough to become the enemy's nightmare. The Grand Duchy of Moscow, which has just become strong, suffered greatly. Faced with tens of thousands of Crimean Tatar cavalry, the Muscovites could not resist, and finally had to build a series of bunkers on the southern border, which were almost connected together to become the mousy version of the Great Wall. Now, the southern Baltic Sea has become the world of the Allied Navy. Marin's fleet passed unimpeded all the way, and he didn't even see a Danish merchant ship. He naturally didn't know that during the more than 1 month he went to Crimea, the Allied fleet basically robbed all the Danish merchant ships. The total number of Danish merchant ships that were robbed was as high as 500. The few remaining Danish merchant ships were also scared to take refuge in Oslo, the Kingdom of Norway, where the Danish crown prince was regent, and no longer showed up. So, at this moment, there was no Danish ship on the Baltic Sea. As long as they dared to appear, they would be robbed by the warships sent out by the Allied fleet for patrol, including people and ships. When Marin rushed back to Copenhagen, he found that the Allied forces had not yet conquered Copenhagen. He came to the headquarters to learn about the battle situation over the past month. It turned out that for more than a month, Schwartz not only continued to bombard the Danish city walls with artillery, but also mobilized troops and horses to launch many strong attacks, but none of them were captured. Fortunately, Schwartz was not stupid. When he attacked, he let the mercenaries from Lübeck and Hamburg take the lead. Therefore, although there were casualties, most of them were from the mercenaries from Lübeck and Hamburg. However, the mercenaries from Lübeck and Hamburg were not stupid. After 2 attacks, these mercenaries found that Denmark had mobilized many civilians to participate in the defense of the city. Even in the past month, after more than a dozen short-barreled Karen cannons damaged a section of the city wall, the Danes would organize civilians to repair and reinforce it overnight. So, these wretched old oil mercenaries went directly to the surrounding areas of Copenhagen to capture Danish strong men, clamped swords around their necks, and asked them to take hoes and climb the city walls in the first place. The defenders of Copenhagen didn't know, and thought that these Danish farmers were helping the enemy to attack the city. So, they used a large number of bows and arrows and stones to attack these Danish farmers who were forced to climb the city walls. Schwartz did not object to this practice of the mercenaries from Lübeck and Hamburg. At least, this can also consume the Danish arrows and stones. But the consequence is that the Danes around Copenhagen hate the mercenaries from Lübeck and Hamburg very much. Because more than 2,000 Danish farmers who were forced to climb the city wall were killed or injured. However, what surprised the Danish army was that some Danish farmers did not attack the Danish defenders after climbing the city wall with difficulty, but asked to join the Danish army to guard the city wall together. Then, after the Danes learned that the enemy was driving their own farmers to attack the city, they no longer killed the Danish farmers who climbed the city wall, but directly accepted them. And those farmers, although forced to climb the city wall, were willing to immediately help the Danish army and fight against the coalition's attack together. After learning about it, Marin did not blame Schwartz, but asked about the effect of artillery bombardment on the city wall. "Master, I used a total of more than a dozen short-barreled cannons and unloaded 10 long-barreled cannons from the ship to bombard the city wall together. The effect was so-so, because we damaged the city wall in time, and the Danes would take advantage of the night to send masons to repair the damaged part of the city wall and reinforce it. That is to say, our artillery will still cause damage to the city wall, right?" "Yes. I understand. Help me convey an order. Order the East Frisian fleet to dismantle all the 18-pound naval guns on the ship and send them to the front." "Ah. What do you mean?" Schwartz was a little surprised. "Since more than 20 artillery pieces can only damage the city wall, then I will dismantle all 618-pound long-barreled naval guns on the ship and bomb them together. I must blow up the city wall. But, this is not good. Master, so many heavy artillery will scare the Allies." Schwartz reminded Marin that at the beginning, they told the Allies that there were only more than 300 heavy artillery pieces. If all 600 heavy artillery pieces were pulled out, it would be too scary. Then, pull 300 of them over. 300 red cannons are enough to break down the city wall. Marin said to himself. Next, the coalition troops began the vigorous artillery transportation process. The 18-pound artillery is very heavy, weighing almost 1.8 tons. This is a lightened version, and the old version weighs 2 tons. Such heavy artillery is also difficult to transport. Therefore, a lot of manpower is needed to transport the artillery from the ship, and even movable pulleys are needed. After landing, they also needed to find a cart that could carry the heavy gun body. Everyone worked together to push the gun to the foot of Copenhagen, then lifted it down, arranged it, and aimed it at the city wall. In this way, in the following days, under the command of Marin, the coalition forces suspended the offensive and concentrated on transporting the guns. Marin calculated that 300 red cannons would consume 1,800 pounds of gunpowder for a round of volleys. The ratio of gunpowder to shells is 1:3, which is the maximum charge, but the siege must use the maximum charge. This time, Marin only brought a total of 400 tons of gunpowder made from saltpeter purchased from India and 100 tons of gunpowder purchased from various countries. Moreover, about 180 tons of gunpowder were used in previous naval and land battles, infantry guns and matchlock guns. In other words, there are only 320 tons of gunpowder left. In total, it is only enough for 300 red cannons to fire 400 times. However, in addition to the gunpowder needed on the warships, the musketeers on the infantry side also needed a lot of gunpowder. Therefore, these 318-pound long-barreled cannons cannot use up all the gunpowder. Therefore, Marin decided to stop the bombardment of the short-barreled 18-pound Karen cannons, save the gunpowder, and supply it specifically to the 300 long-barreled heavy cannons used to bombard the city walls. Moreover, these long-barreled cannons can fire at most 200 times. If the Copenhagen city wall does not collapse, there will be no need for artillery. Considering that the Danes would repair the city walls in the middle of the night, Marin decided that this time the bombardment would not stop in the middle of the night, not giving the Danes a chance to repair the city walls. Fortunately, except for the gunpowder consumption which cannot be regenerated, the iron ball shells can be recovered at night. Because after the iron ball shells hit the city wall, most of them bounced off and fell on the ground outside the city wall. After dark, when the Danes were repairing the city walls, the coalition soldiers could look for my 18-pound iron balls that fell on the ground outside the city. Fortunately, the iron balls can be recovered, otherwise. If it is just consumption, the consumption of iron balls is extremely shocking. Chapter 120, The Vicious Trojan Horse. In the past few days, the sailors of the baggage corps under Marin were busy carrying the artillery off the warships, and the workload was very heavy. Of course, Marin was not idle either. He drove the Danish serfs on Zealand Island captured by the soldiers to build a very tall earthen slope to observe the situation in the city. The earthen slope is about 2,000 meters away from the Copenhagen city wall. Any long-range weapons of the Danes cannot cause damage to the high earthen slope 2 kilometers away. Its height has also reached 20 meters, which is twice the height of the Danish city wall. Therefore, Marin was relieved to take the elite reconnaissance troops such as Saul to the high slope and observe the situation in the city with a telescope. What shocked Marin was that the southwest city wall, which was the main attack of the coalition forces, was greatly thickened by the Danes. Through the telescope, Marin could clearly see that all the houses near the southwest city wall of Copenhagen had been demolished by the Danes. The bricks and stones of those houses were all used to thicken the city walls. The current southwest wall of Copenhagen is about twice as thick as before. No wonder Schwartz couldn't blow it open even after more than a month of artillery bombardment. Moreover, once the wall was damaged, the Danes would desperately send people to reinforce it, which was very difficult to deal with. Marin suddenly hesitated. He was not sure whether he could blow open the wall with 300 red cannons. The Danes were too cruel. In order to reinforce the wall, they did not hesitate to demolish all the houses. Unless these 300 cannons could blow open the wall in a short time, the Danes would definitely repair the wall desperately. If Marin had enough gunpowder, he could naturally bombard it hard. However, his gunpowder was too difficult to get. The main gunpowder in Marin's hands came from 400 tons of gunpowder configured with 300 tons of saltpeter purchased by Columbus from India. The other 100 tons of gunpowder were finally collected by Marin's merchants who traveled all over Europe. For this reason, there is a shortage of gunpowder in the European market now. In other words, once Marin has used up this batch of gunpowder, he will not be able to get gunpowder replenishment for a long time. If there is no gunpowder replenishment, the artillery on Marin's warships and the musketeers will become decorations. Marin doesn't care much about the artillery on the warships becoming decorations. But if the musketeers become decorations, it will be fatal. You know, the Spanish phalanx used by Marin's soldiers mainly relies on the firepower of the musketeers to attack the charge of the plate armor knights. Without the power of the musket, Marin's phalanx will be vulnerable to the charge of the plate armor knights. Therefore, even if Marin captures Copenhagen and obtains the desired territory, he will become a toothless tiger and enter a weak period. At that time, if a strong enemy invades, he will not be able to take out the corresponding strength to resist. And the most direct way to replenish gunpowder is to shoot the fleet to go to India again and import hundreds of tons of saltpeter. However, even if the fleet was familiar with the Indian route, it would take more than half a year to transport saltpeter. If the East Frisian county was attacked during this period, it would be over. So Marin gave up the plan to bombard the Danish city wall and planned to think of another way. However, he did not give up the artillery bombardment of the city wall. In order to play tricks on the Danes, Marin sent people to transfer artillery to the northeast of Copenhagen, pretending to blow up the northeastern city wall. As a result, the Danes immediately took action and once again carried out demolition, frantically demolishing the houses at the foot of the northeastern city wall, and using the bricks and stones of the houses to thicken the northeastern city wall. As for the northwest and southeast directions, because of the water, it is impossible to deploy artillery. It's not that it's impossible to bombard the city walls in these two directions. It's because these two walls are adjacent to the water. Even if the walls are blasted open, the army cannot pour in on a large scale from the gap. Because the soldiers can't float on the water with light skills. Therefore, the walls that can be used for bombardment and influx are only in the southwest and east. As for the iron gate, no one wanted to deal with it. The iron ball would at most deform it a little, but it would not break it. It was also difficult to blow up the thick iron gate using a gunpowder barrel. However, when observing with a telescope on a high slope, Marin discovered a strange phenomenon, that is, the Danes did not seem to block the cast iron gate. Generally speaking, when defending a city, the defenders would generally use various heavy objects such as bricks, stones, and logs to hold the gate tightly against the back to prevent the gate from being knocked open by the enemy's beams. With so many things behind it, it is difficult for the beams to knock open the gate. Because much of the impact of the beams hitting the gate was absorbed by the bricks and logs against the gate. However, Marin, who was observing with a telescope on the high slope in the southwest, which was twice as high as the wall of Copenhagen, found that there seemed to be no debris piled up in the city gate hole in the northeast of Copenhagen. Marin saw that although the Danes were demolishing houses to thicken the city wall in the northeast, they did not pile up debris in the city gate hole. Are the Danes so confident about the city gate? Marin said in surprise. Marin was right. After the previous actual combat test, Marin's artillery had no way to deal with the cast iron city gate in the southwest. So the Danes were confident. In addition, the artillery later changed to bombard the city wall, and the Danes did not pay attention to the accumulation of debris behind the city gate. However, the city gate of the southwest city wall was attacked first, and a lot of debris was piled up behind it. As for the city gate in the northeast, because it had not been attacked before, and it was later discovered that the enemy would not bombard the iron city gate, they simply did not pile up debris in the city gate hole. If only someone could get into the city and open the big iron gate in the northeast. Marin murmured. But how easy is this? Standing on the high slope, Marin suddenly remembered the plot when Guojing helped Mongolia attack Samarkand city, and Mongolian warriors used big wings to fly into Samarkand. However, after careful consideration, Marin denied this method. Because that plot is purely a plot that Lao Jin YY came up with, and it is hard to say whether it is useful. Moreover, even if it is useful, there must be high mountains nearby to engage in gliding. But the city of Copenhagen is either the sea or the plain, and there are no high mountains for gliding. Even if there are high mountains nearby, Marin will not make a hang glider. You know, hang gliders are also very scientific things, and they will not be like The Legend of the Condor Heroes, where you can just modify the tent casually. If the two sides are unbalanced, they will lose balance in the sky and fall down to death. Even if the hang glider is successfully manufactured, what is the use of flying hundreds of people into the city? It is estimated that more than half of them will be shot to death in mid-air as birds. Even if they land safely, they will be beaten to death. Unless there is a Hirogwa who can perform the 18 dragon palms among this group of people. For the same reason, it is not suitable to use hot air balloons. However, it is a good idea to use hot air balloons to drop bombs. But Marin thought about it and gave up this tempting plan. Europeans are too good at imitating each other. If you make a hot air balloon and someone learns it, and drops a bomb into your palace, killing yourself or your family, it will be miserable. Marin, who was full of thoughts, returned to the big tent with a tangled face and listened to Schwartz's report on the battle situation more than a month ago. When he heard that the Danish people driven by the mercenaries climbed up the city wall, they began to help the Danish army guard the city wall, Marin laughed dumbly. It was almost the same to drive those people to fill the moat, but it was unlikely to really expect them to use force against the Danish army. Once they climbed up the city wall, those people would not be threatened by the swords and guns of those mercenaries. At this time, it was very easy for them to turn the tables. Therefore, the practice of letting more than 1,000 Danish men climb up the wall was actually ridiculous and a farce. However, what if there were hundreds of our own people among the more than 1,000 Danish men who climbed up the wall? Marin suddenly had an idea. It seems that this method is feasible. Marin's eyes lit up. So Marin and Schwartz and other men discussed this method. Master, it won't work. After those people climb up the city wall, they will most likely turn against us and help defend the city. If our people climb up with them, they will be easily betrayed by the real Danes. Because our people don't understand Danish. Once they speak, they will be exposed. That's right. If we want to open the city gate, we can only open the northeast gate. But we have to wait until midnight. In broad daylight, there are so many Danes in the city. Under their watchful eyes. It is impossible to send people to the northeast gate to seize the city gate. And if we don't understand Danish, we will be exposed after a few questions, and we won't be able to seize the city gate until midnight. General Stade also opposed this plan. Because it is too easy to be exposed. What if I let my men learn Danish? I'm afraid it's too late. Who can learn Danish in a short time? Moreover, it has to be the dialect of Zealand Island. Once someone hears something unusual, they will be dead. Hermann, the commander of the Lübeck mercenaries, also opposed it. Is that so? Marin held his chin and thought for a while, and suddenly his eyes lit up again. What if we let the Danish men do it? Let the Danes do it. Will they be willing? No one present believed it. Humph, that's not necessarily true. Marin's face showed a dangerous light. What if we threaten the lives of the wives, children and parents of those Danish men? Marin said grimly. This is too inconsistent with the rules. Said Weitzmann, the commander of Hamburg. It's just civilians. We are not targeting nobles. Even if we kill those civilian women and children, it's nothing. You are knights. If you are unwilling to do this, I can let those civilian infantrymen do it. Marin didn't want to delay too long under the city of Copenhagen, so he simply chose a vicious method. What if a civilian climbs to the top of the city and doesn't care about the life and death of his parents, wife and children? Schwartz questioned. Although this situation is rare, it is not uncommon. Well, when you go to the Danish villages to capture men, send your infantry to pretend to harm their wives, children and parents. Those Danish men who will risk their lives to protect their parents, wives and children are the ones we are looking for. Because they care about the lives of their parents, wives and children. As long as we capture their parents, wives and children and threaten them with their lives, they will have to listen to our instructions. As for those who abandon their wives, children and parents and only care about themselves, don't include them in this plan. Good idea. Schwartz and others nodded. Ladies and gentlemen, this strategy is very similar to the Trojan horse in Troy in history. Let the Danes open the city gates themselves, which is even smarter than the Trojan horse. Hermann said in admiration. It's just a little vicious. Weitzman said in a low voice. Let's call it the vicious Trojan horse. As long as it succeeds, it doesn't matter what the process is. The sooner we take Copenhagen, the sooner we can reap the fruits of victory. Come, cheers to victory. Cheers. Cheers. Cheers.